her car, he paid all her bills, everything she wanted, he got.
Clayton's loved one said she tried to break it off, but couldn't.
She tried to end. She tried over and over. She cried for this man to leave her alone. He wouldn't leave her alone. He'd rather have her dead than somebody else to have her.
This is the story of Dominique Clayton, a vibrant single mother of 4 who lived her life devoted to her 4 children. But her world took a dark turn when she became entangled in a dangerous affair with a married officer from the local police department. Little did she know that her search for a happily ever after would lead to an unimaginable act of violence, revealing a web of questionable police conduct and potential cover-ups, and show the lengths that some people will go to in order to silence their secrets. Welcome to Viral Crimes. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories. This story takes us to Oxford, Mississippi. 32-year-old Dominique Clayton, known affectionately as Lucy, was a resident of Oxford, Mississippi. She was known as the life of the party to her loved ones and was missed by everyone anytime she wasn't around. Dominique was a single mother to 4 children, all under the age of 14. Her 2 boys and 2 girls were her entire world, but life presented its challenges. Finances were tight, and managing everything on her own was no easy task. In August 2018, she entered into a relationship with 38-year-old Matthew Kinney, an officer in the Oxford Police Department and a member of the esteemed Mounted Patrol Team. Matthew had dedicated 4 years of service to the department and had even received the prestigious title of Mounted Patrol Officer of the Year. On the surface, Matthew seemed like the ideal and dependable partner for Dominique. However, a significant issue loomed over their relationship: he was married. Following the tragic death of his first wife, purportedly by suicide, Matthew had entered into another marriage and had a child. In addition to having teenage children from his first marriage, Matthew and Dominique had to secretly meet up to maintain their relationship, primarily meeting for intimate encounters. Despite the secrecy, Matthew did provide financial assistance to Dominique, helping her purchase a car, and there were discussions of him contributing to her rent and aiding her in purchasing a house. They operated as a kind of partnership, but Dominique had doubts about the long-term prospects of their relationship. Dominique's friends mentioned that she suspected she might be pregnant. However, she was apprehensive about revealing this to Matthew, as he was adamant about keeping their affair hidden from his wife. She was unsure of how he would react to the news. She would later go on to inform him that she might be pregnant. According to Dominique, while Matthew displayed possessive behavior, he was unwilling to commit openly to her or make their relationship public. At the same time, he didn't want to end their involvement either. Matthew later claimed that he had attempted to break things off with Dominique, but she allegedly threatened to expose their affair to his wife. The exact truth remained unclear, but it was evident that Matthew was feeling trapped, as if the walls were closing in on him. Unfortunately, Dominique's hopes for a happily ever after were not materializing as she had anticipated. On the night of May 18, 2019, it was raining when Dominique contacted Matthew for a ride to her car. Matthew, who was on patrol duty in downtown Square at the time, agreed to pick her up. Afterward, Dominique drove back to her residence and contacted Matthew during the journey. Since her children were staying with a relative over the weekend, she was home alone that Saturday night. At the conclusion of his shift, Matthew returned to a barn where the police horses were housed and intentionally left his mobile phone there, presumably to prevent his movements from being traced. Subsequently, he returned to his marked patrol car and made his way to Dominique's house, discreetly parking the vehicle nearby. Matthew entered the unlocked home during the early hours of May 19 and discovered Dominique asleep in her bed. Quietly retreating to his car, he retrieved his loaded police-issued 9mm pistol and then returned to his girlfriend at approximately 2:05 a.m. Without warning, he fired a single shot at her head, resulting in her death. After leaving Dominique's lifeless body behind, Matthew drove back to the barn to retrieve his phone and casually sent her a text message at 2:20 a.m., going on with life as if nothing had occurred. On his way back home, Matthew disposed of the shell casing from his jammed pistol by throwing it out of the car window onto the street. Unfortunately, the casing was never recovered, leaving behind an important piece of evidence. Later that Sunday afternoon, Dominique's 4 children returned home from their weekend away at around 2 p.m. In an innocent attempt to play a prank on their mother, Dominique's 8-year-old son was instructed to enter the house first with a toy snake and scare her. However, instead of finding his mother ready to be surprised, he made the heartbreaking discovery of her lifeless body. Overwhelmed by the tragic scene, he had to go outside and break the devastating news to his siblings. As investigators began their work, they swiftly uncovered the affair between Dominique and Matthew. Recognizing the potential conflict of interest, they called in the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation to take charge of the case and ensure an impartial investigation. That night, Matthew was brought in for questioning. While he acknowledged the existence of the affair, he vehemently denied any involvement in Dominique's death. Astonishingly, he even suggested the possibility of suicide, despite the absence of a gun at the crime scene. The investigation continued, with the truth hanging in the balance. The mounting evidence against Matthew began to paint a damning picture. Security footage from Dominique's house captured his patrol car arriving and leaving, further implicating him in the crime. The following day, Matthew was taken into custody and arrested for the murder. This shocking revelation sent shockwaves through the Oxford Police Department and intensified the already strained race relations in the state. The case garnered significant media attention due to the disturbing dynamics at play. A white police officer killing a black victim in a cold-blooded manner. Shortly after his arrest, a controversial photo emerged showing Matthew eating a meal unsupervised at a guard's desk in the county jail. When the question of bail arose, Dominique's family expressed outrage, believing that Matthew was receiving preferential treatment due to his former position in law enforcement.
Explosive moments this afternoon inside and outside a Lafayette County, Mississippi courtroom as an Oxford police officer accused of killing his mistress faced a judge for the first time. Good evening, everyone. I'm Katina Rankin.
I'm Richard Ransom. It got pretty ugly. Officer Matthew Kinney is accused of shooting Dominique Clayton in the head. Several of her family members tell Local 24 News they were in a lengthy love affair.
Local 24 News reporter Brad Broder is live to break down what happened in Oxford, Mississippi. Brad?
Katina and Richard, dozens of Dominique Clayton's family members and supporters poured out of this courtroom earlier this afternoon, furious after seeing that accused officer in person in the courtroom. After that family and those supporters left, Oxford police leaders said they also want to see that accused police officer stay in jail.
In a volatile and cramped hallway, supporters of Dominique Clayton showed passion inside.
We need help in Oxford. We need intervention in Oxford.
And then took their emotions outside.
Justice for black people.
Minutes before this fiery display, dozens of family and friends of the murdered 32-year-old mother filled the Lafayette County courtroom. They watched as the man accused of killing Clayton, Oxford police officer Matthew Kinney, made his first court appearance.
How's Mr. Kinney doing?
Very emotional.
Family members said Officer Kinney and Clayton were involved in a romantic affair for at least a year.
He bought her car, he paid all her bills, everything she wanted, he got it.
Clayton's loved one said she tried to break it off, but couldn't. Clayton's son found her lifeless body with a gunshot wound to her head Sunday inside her Oxford home.
She cried for this man to leave her alone. He wouldn't leave her alone. He'd rather have her dead than somebody else to have her.
This afternoon, Oxford's interim police chief expressed his support for the victim and her loved ones.
We are with the Clayton family. We support them, and we don't want a bond. Matthew Kinney committed murder, and we do not want him out.
Matthew's career came to an end as he was subsequently fired from his job and faced charges of capital murder, carrying the possibility of the death penalty. The stakes were high as the legal process unfolded, and justice hung in the balance for Dominique Clayton and her grieving family. Despite pleading not guilty, Dominique's family shared with the media the troubling details of Matthew's controlling behavior. They revealed instances where he had sneaked into her house before, expressing concerns that he was fearful of his wife discovering the affair, which caused tension between him and Dominique. Eventually, Matthew's wife divorced him and moved away, while the legal proceedings continued. As the case progressed, Matthew reached a plea deal to avoid the death penalty by pleading guilty.
Now some breaking news out of Oxford this morning, where a former police officer is expected to plead guilty after a deadly shooting. The Oxford Eagle reports that Matthew Kinney will take a plea deal in connection to the death of Dominique Clayton. The 32-year-old mother was shot to death at her home back in 2019. Police arrested Kinney days later, charging him with capital murder. Family members say the two were romantically involved and that she was trying to end it when she was killed.
His defense argued that the crime was driven by passion, reaching a point where Matthew felt trapped and desired to regain control of his life. However, it was evident to everyone that Matthew should have simply walked away from the situation instead of resorting to violence, resulting in Dominique's tragic demise. His defense contended that Dominique had threatened to expose the affair to his wife and had become increasingly demanding for money. They argued that the overwhelming strain pushed him to a breaking point. On the other hand, prosecutors asserted that Matthew's primary motive was to prevent his wife from discovering the affair, leading him to eliminate his mistress with a fatal gunshot to the head. They emphasized that Matthew's actions were deliberate, as evidenced by leaving his mobile phone at the horse barn prior to committing the crime and parking his vehicle out of sight. After discovering Dominique asleep, Matthew purposefully retrieved his firearm and returned to commit a premeditated act of murder. His actions were not driven by emotion, but rather carefully calculated. At the age of 40, Matthew received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. He remained silent during the proceedings and was subsequently escorted to prison. The family stated that Matthew's cruel deeds had deprived Dominique's children of their loving mother. The son who discovered his mother's lifeless body had endured distressing nightmares as a result. Furthermore, Dominique's family has filed a civil rights lawsuit against the city of Oxford and Matthew. In the lawsuit, seeking $5 million in damages, they contend that officials failed to supervise Matthew adequately, and he was technically on duty when he committed the murder. They also accuse Oxford police officers of causing immense distress to the Clayton family by hastily labeling Dominique's tragic passing as a suicide, despite the absence of any firearm at the crime scene. Matthew had previously faced questioning regarding the suspicious death of his first wife. Although it was officially ruled a suicide, the civil rights lawsuit asserts that Matthew was requested to resign during that period. It is claimed that he subsequently relocated to the Oxford district in an attempt to escape his troubled past. Dominique's family won their civil suit and was awarded $2.2 million. This verdict represents the highest amount ever granted in the history of Mississippi for a case involving a police-involved killing. While acknowledging that the judgment cannot bring Dominique back, the family expressed their joy and satisfaction that her life as a black individual holds value and recognition within the court of law. Matthew, whose duty was to safeguard the public, instead committed a calculated act of murder to ensure his mistress remained silent. What happened to Dominique Clayton is a tragedy. This senseless act of violence has destroyed many lives. She didn't deserve what happened to her, and now 4 children are without their mother, the person who loved and cared for them the most. My condolences to her friends and family. May you continue to heal and one day find peace. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.